Hi, everybody. It is finally Oscar week, and hopefully by now you have joined our Prestige Junkie Oscar pool and started making your picks in all 23 Oscar categories. You can make your picks until right before the Oscars begin. So if you still haven't joined, or your family and your friends haven't joined, find the link in the show notes. Please come join us. It'll be fun. And if you still need some help knowing what's going to win, today's episode is Oscar predictions. I am here with my friend, Vulture's Joe Reid, to go over our picks in every category, the surprises we're anticipating, and which categories you can actually count on for the end of one of the most unpredictable Oscar seasons of our lives. And then after that, you'll hear my conversation with Raj Kapoor and Katy Mullan, the executive producers of this year's Oscars, who, as you hear this, are frantically preparing everything in the Dolby Theater, and shared a little bit with me about what to expect. I'm Katie Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Joe, thank you for being brave enough to join me today.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. I'm feeling the pressure of...
I feel like people, you tell me if this happens in your life, people are like, oh, you follow the Oscars. Like, don't you feel confident about what's going to happen? And I feel like the more you follow this, the
less confident by knowing more.
I don't think I'm that confident any year, but this year is tough, right?
This is why I always lose Oscar pools. I will never win an Oscar pool because I will overthink it every time.
Yes.
And somebody who has like the most cursory like sense of it all is just going to be like, this is the person I think I've heard is going to win. So yeah, and it's like, those are always right.
Yeah, never forget the year we all talked ourselves into thinking Penelope Cruz was going to win Best Actress. And it was just like, obviously, Jessica Chastain.
Guilty as charged. I absolutely did that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and like this year, I mean, we're going to go in reverse order. We'll get to Best Picture at the very end. But you know, it's really not overstating that it's been a very up and down, unpredictable year. And even after all those Honora wins a couple weeks ago kind of made us think, oh, the tea leaves are clear. It's not that clear.
No. And the SAG Awards sure didn't help make it any clearer.
Yeah, we're recording this right after the SAG Awards, and Ralph Fiennes is still holding hands with that Italian actor who played Tedesco somewhere, I think.
Adorable.
It was delightful.
It was.
So yeah, we both have our predictions up at Ankler Pundits, which everyone can go look at to kind of see a wide range of what everybody on the internet thinks is going to happen. And I do not guarantee that what I say in this podcast will be the same thing as what I put on that page.
No, I absolutely make no guarantees of consistency whatsoever.
Yeah.
No.
But Joe, you, unlike me, have watched all of the Oscar nominees. You do
Sure
a
have.
ranked listing even before you were a full-time staffer at Vulture. It's one of my favorite things to read every year.
Oh, thank you.
You've watched all of them. What do you learn from having watched every single nominee? I'm very close, by the way. I'm no slacker, but I just can't commit to the full thing. But what do you learn from watching all of them?
I learned that it's a vast sort of terrain of kinds. It's a much more interesting Oscar lineup if you watch the shorts. That's the thing that I always say.
Yep.
I think it's a much more sort of like rewarding experience. I think if you let the Oscars be your playlist, I think it gives the Oscars a little bit more of a noble meaning than just sort of, chasing, plaudits and whatnot. I think it really makes it feel like, oh, okay, well, now I've done something, worthwhile. I have, at least for this year, gotten some sort of a survey of, once you've seen all the documentaries and the international features and animation and shorts and whatever, that's the full picture. It's not just, oh my God, can we stop talking about Emilia Perez or whatever? But
Well, and that's one of the things that I always argue with. People are saying, like, why are the Oscars so late? And, like, I understand the arguments for it. But, like, once those nominations are out, you need the time to be able to sit through those. I really hope most Oscar voters do the same thing that you're doing and, take the time to watch all of these. And you're exactly right. Like, you can get sick to death of watching Kieran Culkin give an acceptance speech, but there's so much more to it.
Yeah. I will never get sick of watching Kieran Culkin give an acceptance speech, just for the record.
Well, before we jump into our predictions, actually, we are recording the day after the SAG Awards. Do you have any SAG Awards hot takes from what we saw last night?
So I was recording another podcast during the ceremony, so I went back and sort of like watched it all in clip form.
Which is not a bad way to do it.
Very relieved that Demi won Best Actress. After, weirdly, the BAFTAs was one thing. I know there was no reason to feel like the Independent Spirit Award going to Mikey Madison instead of Demi Moore was like in any way predictive. And yet I sort of got that pit in my stomach of like, oh, the tides are turning now. And was I going to look back at the early Oscar season and be like, yeah, she won Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, the two awards that like mean actually
Don't overlap
nothing
with the Academy at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that was comforting and also another really good speech. I I'm so into whatever Timmy Chalamet is doing right now. He's off on his own journey.
We'll get to him.
And I'm really happy with that.
His lime green shirt. We'll have a moment.
Yeah.
In terms of like award show structure, I don't know how much of the clips of Kristen Bell you watched, but the SAG Awards are really peerless at bringing in clips and not only showing the performance clips, but also like people's early work, like the whole the montage of people got their starts on soaps. Did you #1 soaps fan of my life?
But I got to go back and watch it.
Okay, you got to see that.
Yeah.
I just love the way that's a pretty short award show. It was over 2 hours this year, but like it still moves pretty well. But they still make time for all that stuff. I just treasure that about the SAG Awards.
No, I like that too. I think that's very good. Yeah.
Okay, let's get into our predictions. You were talking about the shorts, and your usual podcast co-host Chris Feil and I talked about these a couple weeks ago, so people can hear a much more in-depth discussion about all the shorts. But you have also watched all of them. We're going to go in generally the order of the categories listed on Wikipedia for anyone following along, but start with the shorts. So in order of what is first on the Wikipedia list, we'll do documentary short film first.
Yes.
Nominees are Death by Numbers, I Am Ready Warden, Incident, Instruments of a Beating Heart, The Only Girl in the Orchestra. It's funny that two of them are about people playing instruments. And
I know.
I didn't really realize that until just now.
I loved the both of them too. I think I really liked 4 out of the 5, and the fifth one, which is Death by Numbers, I don't even think is that bad.
Yeah.
I think it's just I think it's the least of the 5. Instruments of a Beating Heart is going to be the pick if people just sort of like go with what made them happiest. And
even though it's got children crying throughout the movie.
Even though it's got children, well, because it has that great sort of like come around moment. It's like it's one of the more satisfying emotional arcs of any movie on the ballot this year.
Yeah, honestly. Anna Yume, the girl playing the cymbal, is going to the Oscars, which I told you, which I'm thrilled by.
Which is a great sign. And if they win, they'll bring her up, I imagine, with them. Yeah. What a superstar. Yes. What a fantastic little kid. I really, really liked The Only Girl in the Orchestra. Another one where, like, if they win, I hope she would never go up to the Oscar stage to help present an award. She does not. She has a conflicted relationship with
arts and fame.
Yeah, Oren O'Brien is her name. Double bass player extraordinaire. Yeah. From the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. No, that's a Netflix documentary. Netflix tends to sort of flex their muscle in the shorts categories.
They do.
So I could see that winning. They do tend to like documentaries about people, you know what I mean? Like a particular person.
Or like even last year, The Last Repair Shop was about like people playing music and the role of that. There's a real theme there. That was a very LA movie though, and this is
very New York. Yeah. Very New York. She moves from one Upper West Side apartment to the other. It is a very New York movie. I think the best of the 5 is Incident. I think in terms of a film, I think in terms of that's the movie where it is taken from police body cam footage and also street surveillance footage. Yeah. And Bill Morrison, the director, turns it into an actual movie. I think there's a way in which you could have just presented that as sort of just like flat footage and let the titular incident, which is a police shooting in Chicago in 2021, I want to say.
Yeah, or even earlier. Yeah. I didn't realize Bill Morrison made it, or like kind of his stature. He's made films like Dawson City, Frozen Time. He made
hugely revered in his field.
So like he's kind of a celebrity in this category, which is I think it's a genuine masterpiece. It's the best movie in the category by far, as much as I like some other ones, and I picked it to win for that reason.
I tend to not pick the best movie in the category in the shorts too often.
Which is a good strategy.
If I'm going to go with my gut, I do feel like Instruments of a Beating Heart is going to be the one. I can just like, I can see it. I can see that little girl ascending to the stage, Ayame. Yeah. And good for her.
It's just us being jealous of the quality of Japanese school lunches.
Right.
It looks so good. Okay. Live action short film. We'll go through the titles. Alien. I don't know how to pronounce that title. Anuja, I Am Not a Robot, The Last Ranger, and The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. As you have told me, this is the category where you get some real stinkers sometimes, and none of these are. These are much better than the average of what we expect here.
The floor on this category is a lot higher than it normally is.
Yeah.
With a couple movies that I think are genuinely really, really good. I really liked Alien because it is about somebody going to go through the process of becoming a citizen and that it being used by ICE agents to apprehend.
Which really happens in real life and is infuriating.
Yes. My favorite of these was The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent, which is a movie about a real-life massacre during the Bosnian-Serbian War, where Serbian police forces boarded a train, asked everybody for their papers, and were taking off of the train Bosnian Muslims and would go on to kill 24 of them in real life. And so in this dramatization, the impactful moment is when there is one person in this one particular train car who refuses to provide paperwork, who refuses to acknowledge the sort of authority of the police in this matter. And it's not the person who you're spending most of your time.
Yeah. It's about both the silent bystanders and the people who don't remain silent, which is really powerful.
As Jane Fonda would probably tell you from her speech last night, quite pertinent to the moment.
Yeah, it's very timely in a lot of the same ways I'm Still Here are, things happening in other countries that feel topical.
Do you think the Mindy Kaling of it all pushes Anuja to towards the top?
I liked Anuja. I wondered this also, and I often vote for the movie that has the most powerful LA connections, which is why I am Ready Warden. Death by Numbers has Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy behind it.
Okay.
So I've wondered that same thing about Anuja, but I think Alien is both a lot of times these movies are real hammer blows in terms of what they're about. And I think that one is as well, but it's really well done. It's not as groan-worthy as some of the other ones are. And it's super timely without being a metaphor the way that The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent is. So I think in this one, I'm going for less of the best made and more the most effective, which I would think is Alien, which I think is really good and deserves to win.
I would not be surprised if Anuja ends up winning, though.
Yep, that's a good call. Okay, animated short. We have Beautiful Men, in the words of Bowen Yang. Where? In the Shadow of the Cypress, Magic Candies, Wander to Wonder, and Yuck.
Yuck.
Which I made Yuck my pick because it is accessible, it is well made, it is fun.
Yeah.
Some of these are a real bummer. As always happens. You think the animated shorts are going to be a good time,
you think the animated shorts category is going to be all happy-go-lucky? Nope.
I also like Magic Candies a lot, but Yuck, I went ahead and made Yuck my pick. I don't know. It feels like a guess.
Yeah, Wander to Wonder is the standout from a formal sort of perspective. Yeah. I think it's the one with the most ambition. It's the one where you will hear people who have seen the shorts, emerge and say that they were most impressed by that one. But I do not think it is the kind of movie that's going to be able to gather enough votes to win. It's dark. It's odd. You're not entirely sure what it's getting at. You know what I mean? All the time. Yuck, I absolutely, more like yum. I loved this movie.
It's delightful.
It's very sweet. It's about, kids at a summer camp who are at that point where is kissing gross or is kissing something I want to do or is it both? So I really like it. I really hope that the voters respond to it. Magic Candies, I think, is good if a little typical for stuff you sometimes get in this category where, I don't know, a lonely kid learns to be not lonely. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. Beautiful Men, I thought, In the Shadow of the Cypress, I was like, In the Shadow of the Cypress is beautiful. But again, we get one of those every year, too. This sort of lyrical, slow, sort of whatever. I think Yuck makes itself stand out from the pack. Yeah,
I think that's a good idea. Those vivid pink lips of people who want to kiss each other will stick with me. All right, shorts out of the way. Let's get into the crafts categories. Again, we're going in the reverse order on Wikipedia.
Yes.
To start with best visual effects, we have 4 of the 5 Apes movies. What was when you were saying that they could all be Apes movie? What's the one that didn't get? Oh, Gladiator 2. That was the other Apes movie that could have gotten
Gladiator 2 didn't get it, and Mufasa didn't get it.
Oh, right. Also has apes. So we have Alien Romulus, Better Man, Dune Part 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Wicked. So my thought process on Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is they've had a pretty effective campaign, as extensive as a visual effects campaign gets, that this franchise has never won a visual effects Oscar.
But they keep getting nominated.
Yeah, the mocap work for them is genuinely groundbreaking and kind of generational at this point. And I don't know that the franchise is beloved. Certainly not the way that Dune Part 2 is, but Weta obviously is kind of a giant in this field. So I don't know if I'm just being persuaded by the campaign and how many of the general Oscar body are paying attention to this, but I'm leaning toward Apes here.
Yeah, I think if the Planet of the Apes franchise is going to do it, I think this is a pretty friendly year for it. I think you can probably rule out Alien Romulus and Better Man. Alien Romulus.
Much as I love Better Man, that's a good ape. Also done by Weta, so they're everywhere.
Good ape. Yes. I'm kind of annoyed that Alien Romulus got nominated for visual effects with the fuckery that went on with Ian Holm. God rest his soul. Wicked, I think, there are ways to honor Wicked without, trying to tell us that it has the best visual effects of the year.
The visuals of Wicked are not its strength, in my personal opinion.
But they're also not its biggest weakness. I think the question is, do they go for Dune Part 2, despite the fact that the most impressive things on a VFX level about Dune Part 2 were also there for Dune Part 1, being like the sandworm, of it all.
More sandworm in Dune Part 2.
More sandworm, definitely. But it's not like Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, where it's like, we're going to up the ante by having this like massive battle that so I would not be surprised if Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes wins. I might sort of take the coward's way out and just go Dune Part 2 based on the fact that it is a Best Picture nominee, that it won this category back in 2021.
I think I don't think it's a coward's. It's a logical way out.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to stick with apes just for fun. May as well.
All right. No, this is good.
Okay. So going in the Wikipedia order, we're already stumbling into a big one. So sorry. Film editing. We've got Anora, The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Perez, and Wicked. And one conspicuously big name there, which is Sean Baker, who is nominated for editing his own movie. If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said Anora will have this easily. If Anora had won the SAG, even though that has nothing to do with editing, I probably would have said the same thing. And now I don't know what to do. Yeah.
It's another one that is kind of up in the air. I've seen some people predicting Conclave, which to me feels like you think Conclave could win Best Picture, and you're sort of backfilling. It can't just win Best Picture, even though it could. Yep. Conclave. I already made my Anora is going to be the Grand Hotel of this year, and
it could be Conclave instead.
Conclave could be the Grand Hotel. You don't even know.
Anything
I want a Grand Hotel.
Wicked could be the Grand Hotel for all we know.
Here's what I will at least say. That situation will happen at some point in the near future. At some point, it's just like, it's the way that things have been going. Best
Explain
Picture
what
winners.
You mean by Grand Hotel for anyone who doesn't know.
Grand Hotel famously won Best Picture in 1930, and only won Best Picture. It's the only movie to ever win Best Picture.
Nominated for Best Picture. Like it was even more dramatic.
You're also right about that. But it is famously the only movie to ever win Best Picture and win no other awards.
It won in 1931/32. That's how they credit it on Wikipedia. And beat mostly movies I've never heard of. So,
well, then,
maybe it deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
So something like Grand Hotel this year. Yes. I still think it's Sean Baker. I don't know. I think Anora is such a good, effective comedy, and so much of that is done by editing. And The Brutalist, I think, is a really impressive editing feat, but it's so long that I literally think people are like, who edited that? Nothing was cut out of that movie.
More like least editing.
But I do think you're right that Conclave is the other one there, because like Conclave is a good thriller, and like that also really thrives on editing. And like the way that movie speeds up and slows down, and when it takes its time and when it doesn't, is really remarkable. Right. But like when you think about Anora and the tone shifts and how it works with upending your expectations and putting you that home invasion scene that is like always a minute away from being dangerous and not fun at all, and how it stays light on its feet, that's editing. And I would hope that when people kind of sit with this and think, okay, if I liked Anora, what is the reason I liked it? And would realize that that's what that is.
I'm trying to go back and see how many times comedies have won in this category.
Ooh, that's a good question.
And like Everything Everywhere All at Once definitely did, but like that's...
Yeah,
I feel like those are
action.
Extenuating circumstances, right? There's a lot of action. There's a lot of time travel stuff.
You're 100% correct. I mean, Anora is a interesting, like, kind of borderline comedy thing.
Yes.
It's also, there's not as many, like, big action-y, like, there's not a Ford versus Ferrari or Dunkirk in here, you know?
Yeah, there's the action level of these is very low. And part of me is just like, is that a reason to predict Wicked? But like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, Dune won this category in 2021. It's not even nominated for the sequel.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with Honora. I think I'm with you.
Okay.
I think it's going to be Baker.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, this is one that's early in the night. If Conclave wins this, like, buckle up.
Yes,
we might
exactly. This will be a good tea leaf category for if you're watching along. If Conclave wins, if The Brutalist wins, then all of a sudden it's wild and crazy times.
Yeah.
You know,
those like hour period where we're like, Mad Max Fury Road could win Best Picture. Like every year we forget about them immediately because history writes over it, but it happens every year.
It's totally true. It's totally true.
Okay, on to costume design. Some of the same names here: A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Gladiator 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. I think Wicked wins this one in a walk.
Wicked is going to win this one in a walk, and I don't hate it only because I don't have a huge affinity for any of the other four.
Sure.
Which isn't to say I don't like them, but like Conclave is a lot of, cassocks and whatnot. And Gladiator 2 is, gladiator stuff. Nosferatu would be very interesting, I think, as a winner.
I mean, Nosferatu really overperforming in these crass categories, like, is a good sign that these people are watching this and recognizing the work. But it's hard to know how strong it can be in any way.
I think we can probably just sort of like easily, if you're looking for free points on your Oscar pool, just pencil in Wicked for best costume design and sort of move on
I
from
think
there.
that's a solid one. Okay, so on to makeup and hairstyling, which is a more interesting question, I think. We've got A Different Man, Emilia Perez, Nosferatu, The Substance, and Wicked. Hang on, I'm going to look at what I predicted. Like, I'm looking at this and thinking like, all right, the safe answer is Wicked, but like, what better effects work have you ever seen in your life than in The Substance in terms of makeup effects?
If Wicked beats The Substance for painting Cynthia Erivo green, I'm going to be just so mad. I'm going to be just so angry.
Do you think it will happen?
No, I think The Substance is going to. I think if The Substance was not a Best Picture nominee, I would have more of a pause. I think makeup is a category that's been reactive to things beyond just, is it a Best Picture nominee? You've got winners like Eyes of Tammy Faye and The Whale and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Bombshell. Like, none of those movies were Best Picture nominees.
Suicide Squad.
So that at least tells me that they are looking beyond just sort of the most sort of surface stuff. Substance is a Best Picture nominee, so it'd actually be like, it would be bucking the trend a little bit. But I think it is clearly the standout. And I think the best makeup and hairstyling category tends to go for the sort of biggest statement.
I think you've convinced me that, because again, like, also A Different Man, like, shout out to A Different Man. It got its Oscar nomination. What a great movie. It should have gotten like 6 more. It's such a good movie. I love it so much. You'll do it as an exception on This Hot Oscar Buzz at some time
100%.
in the distant future. I think like Demi's clip at SAG was her with like the half old age face and half not, and like the crazy gray hair, and like, God, it's such a great effect.
It is. It really is.
So Monster Lissisu hopefully will have.
And there's a lot of like, it's not just one look. Like, it's something you look at something like The Whale wins for, essentially like one look. Like, there's so many different types of things that they're doing with makeup and The Substance, and like it's for effort alone. Just give it to these guys. Yeah.
Also, strong correlation between a makeup win and a lead acting win for a while now. So
this was your MO when making year ahead predictions for a while.
Exactly. I remember I predicted Vice to win Best Picture. I think they did win Best Makeup. So yes, maybe that bodes well for Demi Moore as well. Okay, Best Cinematography. We've got The Brutalist, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, Maria, and Nosferatu. I think you and I are the nerds who absolutely predicted Maria, even though people were so surprised because Ed Lachman shot the hell out of that movie.
And now guess who won the Cinematography Guild prize? It was Ed Lachman for Maria.
If he won here, like, which doesn't
I would be
feel
happy.
Impossible.
It does feel impossible. If it happens, not only is it a win for some of the best cinematography of the year and also for Ed Lachman, who's incredible, it would be a triumph for the craft categories nominating outside of Best Picture, which has been a big bugaboo for me.
Yeah, you've always been all over that.
Yeah.
That said, I still think Lowell Crawley wins this for The Brutalist.
And deservedly so. I love the cinematography for Maria. I would probably still place it second this year to behind The Brutalist. I think that shot of the Statue of Liberty alone, sort of the,
and the lead up to that shot, like the kind of following him through the bowels of that ship where you can like sort of see what's going on and you sort of can't. And then all of a sudden you emerge out into the light and they're filming it on this giant cameras. Like,
Yes.
It's what, like, the accomplishment of that is massive. And like a year after Oppenheimer kind of ran away with this category, like that's how you like keep the desire for that large format thing alive.
Yeah. Yeah. This might end up being the one award The Brutalist wins if things don't break its way in certain close categories. But I think it's the one you can most easily rely upon for The Brutalist. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's another Brutalist craft category: production design. We've got The Brutalist, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. I got a lot. Me and those Wicked sets just have a complicated relationship because I know they built them. I know that they planted all those tulips in Munchkin Land. I could not have told you that any of those things were real when I saw the film Wicked. I still think it might win instead of The Brutalist, which I was
impressed by the tulips, I will say.
I mean, I'm like, when I saw other footage of them, I was like, wow, those look great. In the movie, it's very hard to tell.
If you want to go the other side of that coin, they built filmed on location for Nosferatu and still built a whole castle just because it didn't.
And like a whole city, didn't they? Isn't there like a whole backlot, like not medieval, like an old village?
Which has me sort of wishing Nosferatu would win in this category, even though...
That would be really fun.
I do think The Brutalist has a really great shot here because it is a movie about architecture. And I think, you know me, I'm always the one who says movies about costumes are more likely to win costume design. Somehow, Nope, a movie about cinematography, did not win Best Cinematography or get nominated. And I'm still sore about that.
We'll be mad about that for the rest of our lives.
So I think The Brutalist has a good shot. I think Dune Part 2 has a good shot because, again, production design-wise, they opened up to a lot more different environments. All that, like, weird gothic stuff on Katy Prime or whatever.
All the black and white stuff.
Incredible. So I'm kind of at a toss-up between... Like, Conclave's the only one I couldn't see winning here.
Which is crazy because they rebuilt the Sistine Chapel, the literal Sistine Chapel. But you're right. I don't think it's going to win, but it deserves probably more attention than we're giving it.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, can you think of a object of a physical thing in a movie that was as impactful as the library in The Brutalist? Like that moment where they opened the doors. Is one of the most dazzling things.
It's incredible.
And Judy Becker made that up. Like that is a thing that she designed based on this building that they could find in Budapest. I interviewed her a while ago. I was a big fan. And
you sat at her table for the Critics' Choice Awards.
Critics' Choice. She was a hoot. She had a custom, like, Carrie's necklace in Sex and the City, the like gold script. She had one that said The Brutalist.
Oh my God, I want that.
Yeah, she's extremely cool. So yeah, I'm rooting for it hard. And just like what they managed to fake. Yeah. Because production design is not just what you can build, but also like how you figure out what you can use. And like when she talks about that and working with the budget they had on The Brutalist, it's really incredible.
In terms of making a prediction, I tend to try and not do this particular thing that I'm about to do too often because I find it to be a cop-out in a lot of ways. But sometimes the one you think is least deserving just wins. And
in production design or just in general?
No, in general. At the Oscars. At the Oscars. Sometimes...
Sure.
You sort of just like, of course this is going to win because it's the one I really don't want to win. And I do think like that's too much of a cop-out usually, except in this case. I think I'm going to predict Wicked just because I think it's going to be like all these deserving winners. Of course they'll give it to Wicked.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really big question, which we'll get to later, is how much do people like The Brutalist? Period. Yeah. And I think for production design and to some extent cinematography, like that's a question that will come in there, which is like not about the work that they did, but that's how it goes.
If The Brutalist wins both production design and cinematography, that could be a good sign for Brady Corbet and Best Director.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to him. We'll do Best Sound for now. We got A Complete Unknown, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, The Wild Robot, and Wicked. 3 musicals or like musical adjacent movies, which is interesting. I don't think I should root for this because I think an animated movie winning this is really wild, but The Wild Robot's sound design is exceptional.
It's really incredible. There's a lot going on in that movie. There's a lot of moving parts.
I don't know that there's any evidence that an animated movie has ever won this category. I'm scrolling back through. I mean, it used to be 2 categories. It's been combined. Yeah. So I don't want to root for that. But like, it's always a question between, is it action movies or musicals that win? And really, we mostly just have musicals in here.
Well, especially since they've combined the categories, because it used to be sound editing was for bullets and, like crashes and stuff like that. And sound mixing was for anything with water or musicals. And now that it's all together, it's just like, well, now we've got to re-examine all this
because I think the way the technology works is like it all is sort of the same thing.
Yes.
I guess I'm going to go with Wicked here. Like, I guess we're stacking up wins for Wicked, which is going to be interesting. But that just feels like, in terms of like a popular movie where you can like, oh, I could really hear her singing those notes. That would be the one.
That's, well, and especially because if you compare that to like A Complete Unknown, which obviously also has, I'm sort of discounting Emilia Perez from the conversation.
We keep mentioning it and then not talking about it, but yes.
We'll talk, there's at least one category we'll be substantive about it. But I think Wicked sort of has the edge over something like A Complete Unknown when it comes to being about music. I'm going to predict Dune Part 2. And maybe this is overly optimistic, but I think there's so many different types of interesting sound stuff they're doing in that, from the ambient desert stuff, the voice, the
thumps of the thumper thing. Well, like, it's kind of like the Wild Robot. It's like, what does a sandworm sound like? Like, we all know, but they had to make that up. I mean, they made it up in the first one also, so you can say it's a sequel. It's not as much of an accomplishment, but there's so much new stuff in it, like you were saying. It's
very layered. It's just, if you sit yourself in the middle of a big, huge theater with great theater sound watching Dune Part 2, you feel it.
I sat way too close to the IMAX screen seeing Dune Part 2, and I had their, like, one of their special, like, cocktails. It was like a sandworm margarita or something that was excellent. I had a terrific time. So
fantastic.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Fantastic. All right.
I'm gonna waffle back and forth between Wicked and Dune Part 2. I think I might lean on Wicked, but maybe it'll be a tie. This is the category that tied most recently. So who knows?
Nice.
Okay. We both love this category, except maybe for this year. Best Original Song. 2 songs from Emilia Perez, El Mal and Mi Camino. Then there's The Journey from 688, Like a Bird from Sing Sing, and Never Too Late from Elton John, Never Too Late. What a weird... I don't know. That's not like I guess the better version of this is that the Maren Morris song from Wild Robot makes it in. That would help a little bit.
The Maren Morris song and then the Miley song from Last Showgirl,
right,
I thought
were both very good.
I thought they were both good. I think in general, though, there wasn't a great overall pool to sort of choose from.
Yeah.
You were never going to come up with a great Best Original Song category this year.
Yeah.
Even, Like a Bird, which I would love for Sing Sing to win something.
Oh my
because
God.
I think that's a movie that did not, it got a handful of nominations, but it deserved, I think, more.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it just does not feel like, there's any shot. I think the story of this category is coming down to was Emilia Perez far enough ahead of the pack when all of the controversy happened to maintain a lead, or is this finally Diane Warren's chance to win a competitive Oscar for a song that is not her worst, but is certainly far from her best?
Yeah.
And from a movie that I think is maybe one of the worst movies on the ballot this year.
When your rankings come out, we'll see.
So, and that's not Diane's fault. Diane
that's true.
is not in charge of the quality of the movie. It's a typical sort of Diane Warren uplift ballad from the closing credits of a movie.
Yeah.
I think the reason to give it the award is to give her an award for, she's gotten her honorary Oscar, but we all know.
She still wants it. She wants that competitive Oscar.
She wants the competitive one.
Yeah.
I'm pulling for it. I hope she does. I do feel like if I'm going to throw a prediction, I'm still going to stick with El Mal from Emilia Perez, which won the Globe. And
I think if you've got Zoe Saldana kind of continuing with her campaign, we'll talk about her in a minute. Like, that's her song. That's her big showstopper. It's come up in all her clips at every award show.
If you want to sort of silo away the parts of Emilia Perez that you can still feel good about, it allows you to vote for not only Zoe Saldana in supporting actress, but El Mal in original song as well. I
just feel like if we're going to be like, the Academy's very international, it's not such clubby LA thing, then you don't get Diane Warren. Because like the reason that Diane Warren wins is because she knows everybody in Los Angeles.
It's true.
So I think I'm with you, but I'm also like rooting for that wonderful chaos if Diane Warren finally wins. Because like, she has given so much to the art of songs or movies. She needs a competitive Oscar. I don't know if this is the one for it, but you know what? I don't think these French songwriters for Emilia Perez need an Oscar either. So
no.
Okay, Best Original Score, much more fun. We have The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Perez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. Joe, I texted you after rewatching The Wild Robot with my kids that poor Daniel Blumberg at Brutalist doesn't stand a chance because the Wild Robot score, like, it's so good and so emotional, and like you hear like 3 notes from it, and you're like, oh, the goose migration, like it's
Yes.
and Chris Bowers is a really swiftly rising composer. He's worked all over the industry. He has an Oscar. He won for making a live action short or a documentary short last year.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still rooting for The Brutalist a lot. Like, that score is wonderful. That's another one. You hear 4 notes, and like you'll be hearing da 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 for the rest of your life.
Thing. This is my thing with why I feel like The Brutalist has to win.
Okay,
and which is not to say it's going to win, but like, I need a score to be something where I think about that movie and I hear those notes in my head. This is probably a ill-informed opinion, and I'm just going to throw it out here, that it's more of a me problem than a regular problem. I get annoyed when musicals are nominated for original score.
I don't really understand Amelia Perez or Wicked being here.
I don't
really
know
get
what
how
we're
Wicked
nominating.
is original. Like,
yes.
They eliminated Hans Zimmer's score for Dune Part 2 because they said it was too similar to the original.
Right.
But I mean, I would need to like go back and listen to Wicked specifically, because I know that they were very careful to qualify it, and like God knows that these rules are rule bound, and they were not going to let it sneak through. But I don't get it.
I think in certain cases it makes sense. Justin Hurwitz winning score for La La Land all those years ago makes sense. That score sort of carried through.
And it was original. It wasn't based on something that
and
exists
it was original.
already.
I don't see how, and I don't know what specifically John Powell brought to, the nomination or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough that's new in Wicked, and I don't think there's enough that's notable in the score to Amelia Perez if you're already nominating 2 songs that couldn't. Like, this is where Challengers could have gone. Like, my God.
Look, man, we're gonna be beating that Challengers drum for the absolute rest of our lives. Also,
I know. I agree with you, though. I do think this is coming down to The Wild Robot and The Brutalist. Lord knows I would love to see Daniel Blumberg stalk up to that stage like a Nosferatu of his own. No shade. I love you, Daniel Blumberg. I love watching him just stand at the back of group photos and just sort of loom.
Looks like he wants to go home.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no one more entertaining to sit next to at the Critics' Choice Awards than Daniel Blumberg, who was baffled by like 50% of it, but was lovely the entire time.
Are you going to go with Wild Robot, though?
I think I'm going
Chris
with
Bowers?
Wild Robot. I think that they're...
Oscars do love Chris Bowers.
They love Chris Bowers. He's extremely likable. His list of credits is really incredible, and he's younger than me, which I find very stressful. I just think that score is really memorable, and if you hear 2 seconds of it, you'll feel the emotions of the movie, whereas with The Brutalist, you might be stressed out because a lot of that score is like a ticking clock.
If The Wild Robot does seem to be sort of on the rise in animated features well.
Yeah, we'll get there soon.
So it might be peaking at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, The Wild Robot got 3 Oscar nominations for an animated film. Like, that's
and yet
really
I was
rare.
the one writing about it when it premiered at TIFF, being like, there's Oscar buzz for Best Picture for this movie, because there was.
There absolutely was.
So it was a little bit of a disappointment when it didn't hit the way that maybe people thought it was going to hit as like the big animated movie that everybody's talking about. But I think now that we've sort of recalibrated expectations,
Yeah. Here's a side question for you. Do you think we'll ever get an animated Best Picture nominee again?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Will it be from Pixar? I don't know if it'll be from Pixar, though.
Oh, no, it might not be for Pixar, but I do feel like at some point, yes. I think there will be something that will impress on the level that will, with 10, yes.
All right.
I definitely think so.
Okay. Onward to documentary feature film where we have...
I am, by the way, also predicting Wild Robot, so...
Oh. Okay. So, well, but if Daniel Blumberg gets up there and looks slightly baffled, we'll be thrilled at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Best documentary feature film. We've got Black Box Diaries, No Other Land, Porcelain War, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and Sugarcane. And you, unlike me, have watched all of these. But
I have.
I don't think I need to have watched all of them to confidently predict No Other Land will win, because it has run the table on every imaginable precursor all season. And like, for a movie that has no distribution, has the name recognition compared to a lot of other ones. But you tell me what could maybe upset that.
Well, I think there are a few things. Politics are a tricky thing with this particular situation. Obviously, this is a movie that takes head on the Israeli occupation of, Palestinian territories. I also feel like the reaction to Jonathan Glazer's speech last year may have certain people who vote for the Oscars not wanting to sort of introduce another such moment this year, which is, and I've certainly not talked to anybody who has expressed that opinion or whatever, but like, I feel like after the 2024 election, I am very much on the lookout for silent majorities. So there's also that. I just feel like you could get voters who are essentially too skittish to want to elevate No Other Land to its top spot, which is...
But is there an obvious second place that they would all flock to?
That's where you sort of run into the question, because I think some would say that it's Sugarcane. I think I look at something... First of all, I should say No Other Land is a phenomenal movie. I don't want to slight the filmmaking of it or sort of the
we're here for predictions. We're not here to talk about quality.
I've gotten in trouble for being too glib about these things before, and I don't want to be. I think Sugarcane's a phenomenal movie. I think it tells a very sort of impactful story about mandatory Catholic boarding schools in Canada and the way that Indigenous people were abused and disappeared and murdered. All of these are very heavy topics. Black Box Diaries is about sexual assault in Japan and sort of fighting for the justice of that. Porcelain War is about the war in Ukraine. Soundtrack to a coup d'etat, which I think is maybe the most impressive feat of filmmaking of anything this year, just in terms of the scope of it. It is such a huge undertaking that maybe isn't always to its benefit because it is such a massive project. But I think my gut instinct says Black Box Diaries would be the heir apparent to this category.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what I'm going to end up predicting. But I think you may be right that without a focal point for anybody who is maybe squeamish about voting for No Other Land.
Yeah. That the people who don't want to vote for No Other Land will split their votes enough that it would still win.
Yeah.
I just feel like No Other Land has gotten so much of the lion's share precursor attention that it's the one that people know that they should vote for. And I don't want to be cynical and be like, they're not going to have watched all of these, but like people will vote without having watched all of these, and they will kind of like recognize
they do every year. Yeah.
But no, I think it's a valid question, and I think the Jonathan Glazer stuff, like, if we thought that was an uproar, if these guys win, what they say on stage will probably just be a whole fresh round of it. So look forward to that.
Yeah. Well, and how much time they get to say it, and like everything about that will be just sort of scrutinized very closely. So.
All right. I think we got a few more tight ones coming up. This is fun. Best International Feature Film is Emilia Perez, Flow, The Girl with the Needle, I'm Still Here, and The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Finally, time for us to talk about the role of Brazilian fans in this Oscar race and how powerful they may be.
Do not run afoul of the Brazilian fans, or they will find. I know the Carla Sofia Gascon tweets were not specifically found by the Brazilian fandom, but I do feel like there was.
There's a butterfly effect. If she had not given that interview and talked about Fernando Torres fans, I feel confident none of this would have happened. But how many of them are Oscar voters? And can I'm Still Here, the Sony Pictures classic, Dark Horse, coming back again, overtake Emilia Perez? That's the question.
I also feel like just because there are hordes of enthused Brazilian fans for I'm Still Here doesn't mean that it's not also a movie that the Academy really loves. It's a Best Picture nominee. It's a Best Actress nominee. It's not just sort of like, what else can we find if we don't feel like voting for Emilia Perez anymore?
Yeah.
I think it would have been a threat to win this anyway. I think it had great late-breaking momentum going into nominations.
Again, Sony Pictures Classics, they know how to do this. They have these small movies, they hold them really late, and then they stick with it through this voting period with exactly who needs to do it. It's the father, not in this category, but it just feels like the exact same strategy again.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's going to be probably close. I would love to see what the ultimate tally of votes ends up being in this category. But I do feel like I'm ready to pull the trigger and predict I'm Still Here.
I think I am too. And I can't decide how much of that is us just kind of having been like, it's been a month since the Emilia Perez scandal broke and being like, all right, it's been enough time. We're jumping ship on this.
Well, here's the other thing, Katie. In an Oscar year without a ton of narratives, Amelia Perez is such a narrative that it's like, it's tempting to be like, this will be the determining factor.
Yeah.
In as many ways as I can make it the determining factor.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, as I think we were saying this before, like I'm Still Here as a movie that is topical and feels like if you watch this.
Oh my God.
I think
it's
you
so
watched it after the
pertinent.
election and I watched it before the election. So it does feel like it's a slightly different reality.
Yeah.
And Fernanda Torres, who we will get to in a moment, like is such a visible, good advocate for this movie and its power. Like I do assume people are watching it. I think it's come late and it might be close, but I think people are seeing it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, okay, so we're agreed. We're good on I'm Still Here.
All right,
but
awesome.
It might be a nail biter. Okay, animated feature film. We have, once again, Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul, and The Wild Robot. I mean, Flow had been kind of swooping up everything for a while there, and now The Wild Robot has kind of come into, the Guild Awards. It won some Sound Awards. It's kind of like reestablished its dominant position as the big studio movie. I like the international contingent of the Academy is still there. Flow was such a good, scrappy story. It's such a likable movie. It's a hit, not like a Wild Robot size hit, but like a good size hit.
Yes.
I think I still err on the side of Wild Robot here, but I have a hard time committing myself.
I agree. I also want to say that for as much as visual effects was very ape and monkey heavy, animated feature is very bird heavy. We have 3 movies with birds prominently featured. Justice for Feathers McGraw.
Oh, yeah. And then only a year after The Boy and the Heron. Like, really.
I know.
Birds
Man,
running around here.
Sea change in the category. Yeah. I really liked The Wild Robot a lot. I like The Wild... When my ultimate rankings come out, Wild Robot and Flow will like be within 2 or 3 spaces of each other. Like, they're good. I like them both almost equally. DreamWorks is going to be fine. You know what I mean? It's just like DreamWorks will be fine without winning this award. I do find myself rooting for Flow. I do feel like if The Wild Robot wins, it's going to be very much just like, well, obviously, yes, of course it did. Of course, the Latvian dialogue-free, more
made
sort
for
of esoteric.
$10.
Right. It wasn't going to beat The Wild Robot, which, and I say this as somebody who loves The Wild Robot, is like a masterclass in emotional manipulation for an animated movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like
Complimentary.
Yeah, complimentary. Exactly. Sometimes I want to be taken for a ride, and The Wild Robot took me for a ride. So
I
there we go.
agree that DreamWorks will be fine if it doesn't win this, but I also think that the motivation to make this instead of whatever other thing that they like much less inspiring animated movie. Like I'm looking through
How to Train Your Dragon live action remake.
Sure. Like, so they won the first animated Oscar with Shrek. And like, I think they have not won another one ever. Like
their best chance was the first How to Train Your Dragon, but that had the unfortunate coincidence of being the same year as Toy Story 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
How to Train Your Dragon is a terrific movie. But like Disney and Pixar have had such a stranglehold on this with like, Spider-Man's an outlier. Netflix knows the Pinocchio, Boy and the Heron. So it's not like Disney and Pixar have kind of receded a little bit. So I think for DreamWorks Animation, which is like the other big game in town, to be encouraged to make something arty like this is important. And like Gen Sobolodis, the director of Flow, like doesn't need the Oscar for encouragement to keep making his own like Latvian movies at home. So
it's true. I want to see. I'm so into whatever Gen Sobolodis does next. Yeah. But yeah, I think I'm going to predict The Wild Robot.
I think I'm predicting The Wild Robot too, but I'm really happy for that cat from Flow and how far he's traveled. I asked my kids if the cat from Flow was a boy or a girl, and they're both like, he's a boy. I was like, based on what evidence do you have here? So we're going to have to work on that.
I like that the younger generations have lost the handcuffs of me growing up.
All cats are girls.
All cats are girls, all dogs are boys. I don't know where I got that, but I got that.
I think it's because we have boy cats at home, so that's we're slight bias there. Okay, into the screenplays. We're into the top awards here. Adapted screenplay, we've got A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Amelia Perez, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing. God bless that Nickel Boys nomination. Never felt like a guarantee. It still deserved better from the Oscars.
Won the WGA award.
That's true.
With a few movies that are in the category here at the Oscars were not in contention at the WGA, but still.
But yes, otherwise, Peter Strawn, who adapted Conclave, is just like strolling through this category. Yeah. And I sort of understand why. It's a popular movie. Obviously, we now know it's very popular. And he's very likable, and it's not as competitive as original screenplay. But yeah, I think he's just going to win this and be kind of like, Okay.
Here's what I'll say for Peter
huh?
Strawn. When I read a synopsis of the plot of Conclave, the book, I was like, well, that's just never going to work. It's just like, how are they going to be able to do that without it seeming incredibly offensive or
Oh, you're talking
glib?
about the ending.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I think Conclave carries that ending off as well as you could possibly do it. And I think that begins on a screenplay level.
Yes,
and
because it is different from in the book and in very subtle ways. And like part of that's performance and it's Edward Berger, the director. But I had the same thought and like really incredible to think that at the beginning of the season, we were like, oh, Conclave is going to be the one with the gender identity scandal. And then things really went off the rails. But yes, I think that's exactly right. And I think it's like, it's an airport novel and it's not like that serious, but I think he does careful things that he maintains and maintaining the tone, like we were talking about with the editing. I don't know. He's just like, seems nice and he's worked with a lot of people. And I got nothing against this win. I'm slightly confused by how easy it's been. I would have loved to see, like, I think Sing Sing with a little more energy, this being its one win, could have been a great narrative because you've got Clarence Macklin and John Whitfield who are credited with the story. Like, it's so based within the real world of this, but I don't know. I think you and I will spend a long time talking about like what A24 could have done differently with Sing Sing because it should have had more.
I think so. But yeah, I'm going to go with Conclave.
Yeah. Okay. Next one's tougher. Original screenplay is Honora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, September 5, and The Substance. With the exception of September 5, which I think is happy to be there. I think this is like a 4-way split. It could go anyway.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I mean, I think it's mostly down to Honora and A Real Pain, but I'm just not willing to rule out The Brutalist or The Substance.
I think I am,
okay.
But like...
no, you should. I mean, you probably should. The Substance won that Cannes Award for screenplay.
It is true. I think with it winning makeup and presumably actress, but we'll talk about that in a second.
It's a lot for The Substance.
Well, and it's just sort of like, I think those awards are sort of honoring what is sort of most electric about it. I think The Substance, I like what The Substance does on a screenplay level. I think Coralie Farja succeeds very well with unsubtlety. And I would love the idea of a very unsubtle script winning Best Original Screenplay. I just feel like it's getting what it's going to get elsewhere. I think The Brutalist is your classic example of a director and crafts movie, and like those movies with that it could win a acting Oscar, but I think like those ones don't win screenplay, especially nowadays. So I think your more sort of like writer focused movies are Honora and A Real Pain.
I see the pain in your face.
I genuinely don't know what I want to predict here.
I think I've decided for myself because I predicted Sean Baker in editing, which means I think that Jesse Eisenberg is winning in screenplay. Because Nora's script is excellent. It's like this movie really does have the whole package. It's a wonderful thing. But I think that it is more of a filmmaker movie than A Real Pain. A Real Pain doesn't have the best picture nomination that we thought it might get, so that indicates some weakness there. But like, I think that this many people are voting for Kieran Culkin. Jesse Eisenberg won the Spirit Award. Vastly different voting body. We all know that. But yeah, I think
and won the BAFTA.
But I think, it's true. I think we've got this sense that Honora has a slight edge in a really crowded pack. It makes sense for something else to win here. And I think A Real Pain is right there as something that really deserves that level of attention. I
have always thought that A Real Pain makes a ton of sense as a screenplay winner.
Yeah.
Recently, yes, this category has gone very heavily towards Best Picture nominees, but I do feel like A Real Pain was probably your 11th place, this year.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think this award season, if it's taught us anything, it's that like it sort of ebbs and flows. And I think Nora is going to be successful some places and less successful other places. And I think this is one of those places where it's going to fall just short.
Okay, but it could also fall just ahead and we'll be wrong.
It could,
but we kind of know that entirely. Okay, on to the acting categories. We can do 2 of them quickly.
Yes.
Best Supporting Actress is Monica Barbaro, Ariana Grande, Felicity Jones, Isabella Rossellini, and Zoe Saldana. Good for Zoe Saldana for navigating through a really messy situation with perfect poise.
Yes.
And gonna get an Oscar for it.
Yeah, I think in parallel universes somewhere, there's a version of this story where Ariana Grande sort of triumphs. There's an odd universe where everybody decides that Isabella Rossellini's contribution to Conclave was sufficient. I love Isabella Rossellini, but again, I watched Problemista again over the last week because I was doing the Blanky Awards. She's so much more impactful as the narrator of Problemista than she is.
But you know, we complain about category fraud a lot. And Zoe Saldana is the lead of Emilia Perez. There's a universe in which she's winning Best Actress, and that's a whole interesting conversation.
Yes. Isabella is definitely a supporting actress.
Yeah, Ariana Grande, absolutely a co-lead.
Yes.
So Felicity Jones, I would still say that's supporting. She's only in half the movie. Anyway.
Yeah, she doesn't show up till the halfway point.
I like a true supporting performance, as tiny as Isabella Rossellini is.
But yes, I think we don't need to discuss this too much in terms of who's going to win. Zoe Saldana is going to win.
Yeah. And I like it when a popcorn actress gets to win an award for having worked in the business a long time and showing us something that we didn't know she could do, which I think is how that performance qualifies.
Well, we at least knew she could dance because she was in center stage.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, all good thinking people have. Okay.
And we knew she could sing because of Crossroads. They were singing
that's true. They should have looked at that at the SAG Awards also.
Did they? Nice.
Yeah. Okay, Best Supporting Actor, Borsa for Nora, Kieran Culkin for Real Pain, Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce for The Brutalist, and Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice.
This is a really strong category.
It is a really strong category. And God bless the two Nora guys who didn't make it in, Karen Karagulian and Mark Edelstein, who were also wonderful.
My boys.
Someday you and I should maybe do an episode on why there are certain supporting performances that just get locked into place and never budge.
Yeah.
Which is how Kieran Culkin and Zoe Saldana, but maybe even more so Kieran Culkin, like A Real Pain premiered at Sundance over a year ago. And I saw that on the virtual platform. I was like, wow, he could win an Oscar for that. And
see, I never considered it an Oscar contender until the fall festivals happened and people started talking and sort of putting him in lineups. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had the same thought as a lot of Oscar voters, and they have never shifted from that opinion.
Yeah.
And I think he's great in this. He was great on Succession. It is absolutely partly a win for Succession. I don't really have a beef with that. Like Allison Janney winning an Oscar for I, Tonya, partly because of The West Wing. Fine.
Sure.
I don't think he would be my pick of these winners. I would probably do Edward Norton or Guy Pearce first, but I don't resent it. I just still don't really get why it has been so rubber stamped all season.
I was sort of that way with Davine Joy Randolph last year.
Sure.
A performance I loved, but I was like, I'm not sure what it is about this particular performance that is sweep category. And I think these are sort of, traps we fall into in that, like, there is no kind of, you can't compare across eras that way or whatever, but like, or across years. Sure. But sometimes it's just the voters sort of see something and they're like, that sounds right to me. Sometimes, you know what I mean? And they maybe just don't want to delve into every single category as deeply as everything else. And listen, everybody's got a lot to do. So whatever.
I mean, in the time in January where I thought A Complete Unknown was poised to surge because it was making all this money, it was very well liked. I thought Edward Norton was going to make a run for it somewhere. Yeah. Like he could, because he's so wonderful in that movie. Doing again, like I guess we knew he was capable of it, but not that much. And he's just kind of like the heart and soul of this movie that doesn't have like a ton of heart otherwise. And
here's where I will sort of throw the gauntlet down to. You talk about, the things we can change and things we cannot change. Sometimes the Academy is too big of a beast to sort of, push. I think we can start with our friends, the critics, who when they see something like this happen, you can tell.
You're talking about the Critics' Choice Awards?
No, I'm talking about the regional, the New York and Los Angeles and National Board of Review critics. When you see this Kieran Culkin thing happening, you don't have to, you don't also have to jump onto that same. And I know it's not bandwagon jumping, but it's just like sometimes, vote for your second favorite guy then. You know what I mean? It's just to just keep this shit interesting.
I mean, they vote in early December where it's like less clear that something is going to steamroll. Like, God knows I've tried to change the Critics' Choice Awards from inside enough and you can't ever get it to happen because it's too many people. But yes,
I just feel like once Kieran won New York and Los Angeles, I was like, it's game. Like genuinely, I was just like, it is. I felt it the whole way.
Yeah. So. There's a world of like, Anora would not be as good a movie if you were Borisov were the only supporting actor. It's kind of the whole point of the movie. But if he were the only one, I wonder if that would have been a more of a big threat too.
Maybe. He's just so handsome, Katie. He's just so handsome.
Listen, I've seen him at various parties throughout the season. It's a real brag. I'd like people like, hey, do you want to say hi to Yura? And I'm like, yes, of course. He's beautiful to look at. And we're speaking in a crowded room and he does not speak English as his first language. We don't have anything to say to each other, but we can look at each other and it's a treat. All right, actor and actress. Here we go. Let's do Best Actress. We've got Cynthia Erivo for Wicked, Carlos Sofia Gascon for Amelia Perez, Mikey Madison for Honora, Demi Moore for The Substance, Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here. All 5 Best Picture nominees, which is great. I like that as a trend. I like, even though it's fewer movies. All right.
No, I like that trend in this category particularly because that was another old bugaboo of mine was Best Actress was never reflected in Best Picture.
Girl movies aren't important, obviously. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the real game is still between Demi Moore and Mikey Madison. But can we talk about the Fernanda Torres theory here? Like, since we've been talking, I got a message from a friend of mine who was like, I'm predicting Fernanda Torres in Best Actress. And, like, that's not the only person who is suggesting that right now. Because I'm Still Here as a Best Picture nominee, because there's this idea that, like, you know, you got between Demi and Mikey, it could be split. I feel like that's a Penelope Cruz and Parallel Mothers.
I was just about to say, are you pushing me to do the Penelope Cruz thing again?
No, I'm saying, like, do you understand where that's coming from? Do you see a logic there? Okay.
I do see a logic there. I think the logic there is that, again, they nominated Fernanda Torres for a reason. I think sometimes when you get these, like, shocking nominations, and you're like, where did that come from? And it's just like, well, there's clearly a huge base of support for this, and you cannot discount that. So I definitely think that's possible. And I think also now that Mikey Madison won BAFTA and won, you know, Independent Spirit, which again does not, you know, overlap voters, but that was a chance for, you know, people to see her winning. Those votes are already cast. So, you know, it's tough to say, but like certainly there is more of a split of the votes between Madison and Moore than we maybe thought a few weeks ago.
Is there a vote splitting example other than Adrian Brody winning for The Pianist that we point to about how this can happen? Because I feel like we talk about it a lot, but it's really rare to see it actually happen.
You took the one that I always talk about. So
that's the one, right?
It is the one. I'm trying to sort of go through and see if I can very quickly land on something else. But some of these stuff from like the 80s or whatever, you don't want to like...
Yeah, you're in a different world by then.
Right. And it's just like, how much do I really remember? Yeah. Those Hilary Swank but Annette Bening years were very much like 1 versus 1.
That's the 1 versus 1, like Glenn Close and Olivia Colman. Like Olivia Colman comes up as a surprise, but she was like the clear second place choice. And so I think that's why like Demi Moore and Mikey Madison, and like they have different narratives. They're coming from different places. Their movies kind of mean different things. I don't know. Like, I love Fernanda Torres and I'm Still Here. Like, that win would be a huge shock and a thrill. You are obviously very in the tank on Demi Moore, thanks to your, not just because of that. You've been hosting your Demi, Myself, and I podcast. You've gone very deep on her.
Yes.
I think she is Brendan Fraser and Mikey Madison is Austin Butler. And we know how that turned out.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Again, I would have been a lot more nervous about it had Mikey Madison won the SAG award last night.
Yeah, I would be too.
Demi winning the SAG sort of calmed me. And I'm still kind of just amazed that we've gotten here, that we've gotten to this moment on the precipice of Demi Moore, of all people, to maybe about to win an Oscar for, of all movies, The Substance.
I know.
It's so cool. It's just, again, this is the other thing is part of the reason why I do this podcast on Demi Moore isn't necessarily that she's like my favorite actress of all time, even though I, you know, quite like her. But I think her story is so interesting because she was so very much the, you know, she's said popcorn actress, but I would also just say like she was the box office. She, you know, had all those hits.
Yeah.
And she had all that, you know, press attention. And she was mostly never even considered for awards. Like Ghost is probably the closest she ever came to it.
Yeah.
Got a Golden Globe for a nomination for that, but then was very much overshadowed by other elements of that movie.
Yeah.
Brendan Fraser is a really good comparison, actually, for that very same reason, where it's like Brendan Fraser never really came close.
No,
to, you know,
there's no like snub in his past that they were making up for.
Right. But I think the narrative of it for Demi is much, to me at least, is much stronger in the fact that like she was kind of knocked for taking all these roles in these, you know, not sexually explicit movies, but like movies that sort of like front loaded the issue of sex in,
her
you know,
beauty.
In Indecent Proposal and Disclosure and Striptease and all this sort of stuff. And also the fact that like she got knocked around for her marriage to Bruce Willis. The tabloids were all sorts of, in their business then. She got knocked around for being a cougar, for marrying Ashton Kutcher and whatnot. And like, this is somebody who I think really deserves to have her moment in the spotlight. And I'm really, really glad that she's getting it. So.
Don't you wonder what the Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher household has been doing all this award season? Like, how are they following any of this? I have questions. Yeah. The other trend that I would point to me, as a set of Mikey Madison, is that, so the idea that like the hot young ingenue winning Best Actress was like very much a real thing for quite a long time. Like, I think Emma Stone is probably the last example of it in 2016 for La La Land. By the time she wins her second Oscar, it's because she's kind of like a powerhouse at that point. And it's leaned much more toward like older actresses who can kind of use their power to get a movie made. Like, that's Frances McDormand, that's Renee Zellweger and Judy, that's Jessica Chastain and Isa Tammy Faye. Like, Demi Moore's not a producer on The Substance, but like, obviously her being in it is what makes it capable to make that movie. And I think that reflects a different Oscar voting body and their priorities for actresses, like, which is a good thing.
Yes.
And I think that Mikey Madison is going to just have to wait her turn, the way that many young Best Actor contenders before her have had to do.
No, it to me makes a lot more sense than the sort of old way with the old Academy of, sort of thrusting this notoriety and this expectation. The Oscar brings with it a ton of expectation, and not everybody is able to live up to it. And now maybe, if there is a little bit of paying your dues or whatever, mostly I think you should just like vote for the performance that you think is the most impressive. But obviously, it's much more complicated than that. We wouldn't have jobs if it wasn't more complicated than that.
What if we get back to the Demi Moore who like produced Austin Powers? Like, what if that's the level of like power she brings
Hell yeah.
back?
Like,
incredible.
Honest to God. Yes, absolutely. If Demi sort of moves into, I want to see Demi Moore at the head of a movie studio in 10 years. That's what I want.
God.
I want her to Sherry Lansing this thing.
Okay, let's go to Best Actor. Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown, Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing, Ralph Fiennes for Conclave, and Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice. The lineup that we had 4 out of 5 in place in mid-September and spent the whole time wondering who was going to get that for the slot. And I think maybe there was a point where we thought Ralph Fiennes would jump in. He's, never won. It's kind of an oversight at this point. But I do feel like it's been between Adrian Brody and Timothée Chalamet basically all along.
And it's not only just been Adrian Brody and Timothée Chalamet, but it's been just Adrian Brody. He won everything. And every time it came up, just like, well, it's probably a toss-up between Adrian Brody and Timothée Chalamet. But that coin kept flipping heads, 7 and 8 times in a row.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, the 50-50 went the other way to Chalamet. And
at the SAG Awards, yeah.
At the SAG Awards. And I was talking to my Vulture colleague, Nate Jones, about this, literally like right before we started recording. I said, I've been waiting for a narrative to emerge from this category because Brody, and I think Brody's phenomenal in The Brutalist. He richly deserves this nomination. I'm so glad that he's like back in an Oscar lineup. I don't think there's a ton of narrative there
for him to have
Brody to win his
Oscar.
Second Oscar. It's not like Hilary Swank where she was, in the movie that was, going to win Best Picture. Brutalist is, there's probably an outside shot that The Brutalist could win Best Picture.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of performance where everybody is like a revelation, a transformation, or whatever. There's no like there's no mandate to award the performance itself. There's no like, you have to, kind of a thing.
Honor the man, honor the film.
And I think just in terms of as a campaign, I think there are things that probably could have been leaned on a little bit more in terms of, the 20 years that's passed since he was last, in this spot, his career maybe sort of, going on a downturn, whatever. We haven't really seen a ton of that. And as a result, I don't know how many people are casting that vote emotionally for Adrian Brody. And I think people do cast votes emotionally. And so whether enough of them will cast that emotional vote for Timothée Chalamet, because I do feel like for every 2 people who say they really like Timothée Chalamet, I think there's at least 1, maybe 2, who talk as if they sort of resent him for being
because he's young and hot and makes
and pretty and talented and like how dare he which I whatever, I feel that way about enough people that like I get it. I've always been fond of Chalamet. I like the thing he said in his SAG speech where he's like, I take this seriously and I want to be one of the greats. I like that. I think that's actually like, give me that as a sort of personality template going forward. Yeah.
And also not, I'm one of the greats. Not like I've earned my spot among you. Like that like, New York hustle kid thing. I mean, he's like, he came from relative wealth. He's fine. But he has that ambition. Yes. Still, like he could have come from the set of Fame or something like that. Like having gone to LaGuardia.
Right. And I do feel like the SAG Award, I think he was really composed when he won that SAG Award.
Yeah, he was.
I do hope that if he does win the Oscar, that we see a little bit of emotion. I don't need him to like. I don't need to like him to like break down in full tears, but like I
Zoe Saldana will do that. Don't worry.
No.
And Kieran Culkin will act as if he's over it already, and
but
that
do
will
you
be the
think
balance.
Chalamet is going to win, or do we think like this is a blip?
I don't think Chalamet's going to win, but it's a coin flip in my head, like you were just saying. Like the Oscars don't like young men winning Oscars. And Adrien Brody is the exception.
I was going to say, what better occasion?
I know. He is the youngest Best Actor winner ever. Chalamet would beat that record by like 10 months or something like that.
Chalamet's not that much younger, though, than like Eddie Redmayne when he won.
No, it's true. And Eddie Redmayne is a good example because that's somebody who was like, oh, wow, you've been around for a couple of years. Like, and now we see what you can do. And Chalamet, like, Call Me By Your Name came out 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately very hard for me to wrap my head around.
Right.
Like he's not new, and he has made a lot of people a lot of money, top lining Wonka and Dune and A Complete Unknown. So he kind of has that.
Wouldn't Chalamet winning dovetail pretty well with things like Jessica Chastain winning for playing Tammy Faye Baker and Renee Zellweger winning for playing Judy Garland and like
Gary Oldman winning for playing Winston Churchill. Yes.
Rami Malek winning for playing Freddie Mercury. You know what I mean? Like they like, they like a biopic performance.
The Chalamet narrative has made more sense to me all year. And then Brody kept winning, and Brody kept showing up at all these events in Los Angeles, which here's me like turning into an LA bias person when I know the Academy is super international. But like, I think the natural constituency for Timothée Chalamet and for the movie A Complete Unknown is those LA studio people who are at all these events, and he was not working the room, and Adrien Brody was.
That was another thing that actually Nate and I were talking about. He said he's talked to award strategists who really made the point of like Chalamet ran a very alt campaign for the Oscar, and that thing is going to be a no-no until it works. And it's going to at some point work. You know what I mean?
There's probably an example of somebody else, or like Leo DiCaprio. Like he's not going to run a campaign and like go shake all those hands, but like he is more established. I mean, and Timothée Chalamet obviously is like, kind of blatantly positioning himself as the heir apparent to Leo at this point.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt, I think, did work more of the room when he won for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I think there is a level of stardom where you do play the game a little bit differently.
Yes.
And so he's been giving that a shot. But like the question is like, does that work, or do you have to be like Leo and wait until you make your bigger movie in your 40s to actually win?
Right.
So who do you think is going to win?
I'm going to put my chips on Chalamet.
Okay.
It's I understand that like it's taking a little bit of a chance.
Yeah.
And certainly it's allowing me to predict the one I want to win, which is always dicey.
I do want Chalamet to win. Also, it's like The Brutalist is my favorite of the Best Picture nominees. Like I love Adrien Brody in it.
Yeah.
But no, I think like for a young hot star to have an Oscar like Timothée Chalamet is good for everybody. It is good for the business, which is, again, why I felt like he should have been in those rooms at the PGA Awards shaking hands, but, whatever. I would love it for him to win. I'm going to stick with Brody for now, and by Thursday, maybe I'll have changed my mind.
I think it's only right that we split on this. It would have felt weird to have too much agreement on that category.
Well, get ready for more head-scratching decisions. Best Director, we've got Sean Baker of Anora, Brady Corbet of The Brutalist, James Mangold of A Complete Unknown, Jacques Audiard of Amelia Perez, and Coralie Farjat of The Substance.
All first-time nominees. I love it.
All first-time nominees. I remember when The Brutalist won, or when Brady Corbet won director at the Golden Globes, and we're like, rewind 3 years and tell yourself that Brady Corbet has a Golden Globe and figure out how we got there. It still feels surprising. Honestly, the same for Sean Baker. We lived through the Red Rocket Oscar campaign and the Florida Project that went nowhere. And I do think it's out of the two of them. And
Yes.
I don't know who's going to win. I take that back. I feel like it's Sean Baker.
Yeah.
Sean Baker has been absolutely everywhere. He is in every single one of those rooms. He has had a different speech for every organization.
He's been really, really good with speeches, I have to say.
Yeah,
really incredible.
And really topical and really talking about the business and what's hard about it. And he's like throughout the entire Honora thing, like I moderated a press conference with him and the cast in like December, and he was talking about theatrical windows and why it was worth fighting for a theatrical release for this one. I think he is speaking directly to the business. I think Brady Corbet is also really good in a room. Like I've seen him speaking at Q&As and how he talks to people and how he talks about what it took to make The Brutalist. I think Sean Baker is like a little more effective a messenger, and I don't know how much a difference that makes. Because I think if you're looking at these movies and saying like, which one is the like massive director achievement, who pushed the bigger boulder up the hill, it's Brady Corbet.
Yeah.
So how do you split the difference between those two?
I think of the two movies, I prefer The Brutalist. I think, and I like Honora quite a bit, but I think The Brutalist is like one of my very top movies of the year. I think the person I'm most rooting for to win is Sean Baker.
Yeah.
I just would really love to see, especially after this great run of movies that he's been on. I am, president of the Red Rocket fan club. I know that was a more divisive one, but I thought that was really a tremendous movie. And obviously the Florida Project and Tangerine and his earlier films.
Yeah, people think Tangerine is his first movie.
Well, it certainly seems like a debut movie, right? It has that kind of energy.
That scrappy energy, yeah. And
but
that's
all of
such
his
a
movies
benefit.
do.
That's such a unique thing that he has and has maintained throughout his career. And has been like really doggedly like making movies his own way this entire time. Like in his Indie Spirit speech, he called himself an indie film lifer and like how he's not doing this to try to get a franchise. And I don't know how many of the Oscar voters are as moved by that as the Indie Spirits voters would be, but it's a strong story to tell.
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think he's a great standard bearer for the industry right now, and an unlikely one. But I think that's the speech, certainly, that I'm most looking forward to seeing for Best Director.
Do you feel confident that he's going to win?
No, I'm going to predict Brady Corbet. I've been predicting Corbet pretty steadily through this season, and this feels like a split year.
Yeah.
And when you do the split, the winner of Best Director is the person who had the more sort of the greater undertaking, the more technical sort of achievement. And then your Best Picture winner is the one where the story is more compelling and like that kind of thing. And this feels like a natural split. Honora Brutalist feels like a natural split in that way, where Honora is the picture and Brutalist is the director.
Even though I don't think I would say Brutalist is like in the number 2 or number 3 slot for Best Picture. I don't think you would either.
I would probably put it in the number 3 slot.
Okay. All right. We'll get to that in a minute. But, Edward Berger of Conclave is not nominated here.
Right.
I feel like there was a minute where James Mangold could have made a run for it again when I thought Complete Unknown was going to surge a little bit more. But
Edward Berger, by the way, is going to be the director that most screws up Sporkle quizzes for me for a long time. Because
you're going to say he was nominated and he wasn't?
For this and for All Quiet on the Western Front. I was sure he was nominated for All Quiet on the Western Front. And I was just like, nope, apparently not.
I know.
So,
well, that's why when there were ads for Conclave and they said Academy Award winner Edward Berger, and I was like, bro, he doesn't have an Oscar. That Oscar went to Germany.
It went to the nation of Germany.
And Volker Bertelmann and whoever else made that movie. I think I'm sticking with Sean Baker, and I think this might be my I was at the PGA Awards bias showing, and this is honestly something I'm going to have to reckon with now that I'm going to more of these events in person, how much I'm counting on those things to be maybe more important than they are.
Yes.
But I totally agree with you that it makes sense for it to be a split year. So
yeah.
Somewhere I'm going to turn out to be wrong, but I'll stick with that. So let's wrap it up with Best Picture. I'll go through the 10. Honora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. I guess I was saying for a period, I was like, I feel like there's 6 movies that could win Best Picture. And then Emilia Perez knocked itself out.
At one point, that was true.
Yeah.
And
Emilia Perez kind of self-immolated. It really came down to 5 for a while, which was being Honora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, and Wicked.
Wicked's not going to win, though, right?
Wicked's not going to win. So I thought until the last minute that Wicked could win SAG. And
sure. I would not have been surprised if Wicked had won SAG.
And like even at this point, I was probably like, that's more of a Hidden Figures kind of win, like a big popular movie that people really like. I thought Wicked could have won PGA. Like there was a path for Wicked that I don't think is there anymore.
Right.
I'm not totally sure there's one for A Complete Unknown either. I'm not sure what you
That's another one where
evidence.
I thought it was, I think up until the point where Enora had that great weekend, A Complete Unknown was possible. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sitting in the room thought it could win a PGA and go from there. So that brings us to Enora, The Brutalist, and Conclave, which is really riding high off of that SAG Ensemble win, as well as the BAFTA win for Best Film, which I think a lot of us kind of thought could happen and kind of bump into the Enora momentum. And I don't think I thought Enora was going to win ensemble at SAG. Like movies with that few people nominated don't often win the ensemble award at SAG.
I think if anything but Conclave had won, though, it would not have raised an eyebrow for me.
Yes.
Conclave winning SAG on the heels of winning BAFTA is something worth considering.
Yes. And being the movie that all along we've been saying, like on a preferential ballot, it's going to be the most likely to be in those number 2, number 3. Now, okay, I said this earlier today, and I feel like I always describe preferential ballot wrong. Everyone ranks their picks, and then if you don't have enough first place votes to get past 50%, is the movie with the most last place votes thrown out? What gets thrown out?
The movie with the fewest first place votes.
I see. So
gets thrown out, and those votes are redistributed along the second place.
So someone who put Dune Part 2 in first place, then all of their second place votes become their first place votes.
Yes.
Got it. So that's the logic that no matter what your first place movie is, it's pretty likely that you'll have Conclave pretty high up there. And like, we'll never know. You know very well that if I had 3 wishes from a genie, getting Oscar vote titles might be one of them. I want to know so badly. But I would imagine like 3 or 4 rounds.
That needs to be the Willy Wonka golden ticket thing, where like 5 people in the entire world get a golden ticket to go to the Academy Museum.
And you're never allowed to tell, but you just know.
For an afternoon, you get to pore over results, and you're under strict non-disclosure.
Oh my God, what a dream. I'm going to write a screenplay about that. But don't you assume that this is a year where there's going to be a lot of rounds of counting those ballots?
Yes.
Like it's not going to, there's no clear first ballot winner. So
no, I agree.
Does that mean Conclave wins Best Picture?
I think it means Conclave has a real shot to win Best Picture.
Yeah.
I am ultimately not going to predict it to win Best Picture. But
nor am I.
I think that has a shot. I think The Brutalist has a shot. I think Enora has a shot. I think those are your 3 right now. And I'm going to predict Enora, both because it is the safer pick, but also because it just feels like one of those, like, hold your breath, Conclave could win. Sort of how All Quiet on the Western Front felt for a minute there, remember? When we were like, watch out, All Quiet on the Western Front.
That
Maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once is too weird.
In the middle of the ceremony, when we kept hearing that score, like Volker Bertelmann's score, like stressing everybody out. No, that's exactly, Edward Berger, your power. He's got another movie out this year. Like he's going to be right back at it.
Honestly, for as much as like I was not on board with All Quiet on the Western Front, I am now like, I'm digging what Berger's
and that's the power
doing.
of Conclave. Like, where neither of us would like. If you had an Oscar ballot, where would you put Conclave on your ballot? Probably not below 5.
No, but not above 5. Or maybe it's exactly 5. Maybe it's exactly 5.
I just think that Conclave has won over people from every possible direction, and that is a really, really powerful position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though I'm not predicting it either. Because I think there's an anti-Enora contention. I think there are people who are going to turn it on and be like, oh my God, this is gross. I don't want to watch a stripper. I don't like this music, whatever.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people really like what it does. And it's been really widely seen. It's got that like Palme d'Or stamp of approval. So even if you're like, I don't know if I love this, but like I'm on the Palme, there must be something to it.
It has snob appeal because of that. Yep.
Yeah, it has snob appeal and it has an emotional pull, and which they have done such an amazing job of promoting in the Phase 2 campaign, the Follow Your Heart thing, which is sort of not what Enora's about.
Nope.
It's worked very well.
It's almost the opposite. It's almost just like wait a second.
Follow your heart, it might not end well.
Just like take a second and think about it is sort of the message of Enora.
What's the take a second and think about it? Is it like Nickel Boys? Just being like, come on, guys. Think about what's real here. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Enora also. I mean, I do think the PGA and DGA wins are just really, really powerful evidence of a broad appeal, especially because PGA is a preferential ballot.
When they happened, and like, I think...
In an hour on a Saturday night?
Well, and also enough time before voting started to cause some people to see it if maybe they hadn't seen it yet.
Yep.
Or to really recalibrate their,
or like I thought I loved it, but I didn't think it could win. But now that it could win, I'm going to vote for it. I think that's a powerful, because that's what I think happened at the Indie Spirits. Like it just like steamrolled
people
at the Indie
don't like
Spirits.
to feel like they're throwing their vote away. That is the story of so many Oscar things about like why all of a sudden did this become, a landslide. It's like people don't like to feel like they are throwing their vote away. They like to feel like they are part of the story here.
You know what we need to do sometimes is say what Traders Roundtables can tell you about Oscar voting.
Oh, that's a big one.
Vote away comes up.
That's a big one. Nobody wants to throw their vote away.
No one wants to be Tom Sandoval, just constantly voting for the wrong person.
What Tom Sandoval can teach you about the Academy Awards.
Maybe it's not too late to write that piece this week. So we both think it's going to be a Nora.
Yes, I do.
But also,
keep an eye out. Don't turn that dial. Don't turn off that live stream. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Conclave winning Best Picture would be kind of strange. Like if you look at the recent run of Best Picture winners.
Yes.
It's not Green Book. I feel like that's like the worst thing you can say about a movie these days, which is not what it is.
Stripped of political context, that's the most applicable in terms of like, that's the movie this year.
I mean, Coda is a better comparison as like a pretty likable movie.
Sure.
With actors
Best Director nominee.
Like you're excited to see all these people succeed. Like it's not breaking any new ground. I mean, Coda was, had the deaf representation, so it was a little bit. And then Nora and The Brutalist are more in the Everything Everywhere Parasite mold. I mean, Nora is very much in the Parasite mold.
I think that's right. And I think that's what makes me sort of feel good about it. And The Brutalist is in the Oppenheimer mold.
Yeah.
So it gives you a real interesting sort of survey of the last 3 Best Picture winners. Mm-hmm. Each one sort of has a little bit of a antecedent in.
That is a really good way to put it. So do you think it will be weird if a Nora wins Best Picture, Mikey Madison doesn't win Best Actress?
I don't think that. A lot of people are saying that's so weird. I don't think that's necessarily weird.
I think it's historically weird. I think if you go back in 50 years and you're trying to explain to somebody why this happened, you have to be like, look, man, to be more, you got to go see a Few Good Men to understand how we got here, but you'll get there.
Sure. And I guess if you're talking about like recent history, then it's like, Nomadland goes hand in hand with Francis, and Everything Everywhere goes hand in hand with, Michelle Yeoh.
Murphy.
Right. But like Sally Hawkins didn't win for The Shape of Water, and Michael Keaton didn't win for Birdman. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the case that these things just sort of like match up exactly the way that you want it. Renee didn't win for Chicago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Well, Joe, next time you're on the podcast, we'll be doing our 2026 predictions.
I cannot wait. Oh, my God. It's my most anticipated one just because I'm just like, turn that page.
Yeah. And people will be, we'll do some reflection on what we got right and wrong about this past year. But yeah, people can hear you on This Hot Oscar Buzz in the meantime. And thank you for doing this with me. We went long, but hopefully it's what the people wanted to hear.
Yes, exactly right. Thank you for having me. This was super fun. On to Sunday.
I'll be back in a moment with my conversation with 2 of the producers of this year's Oscars, Raj Kapoor and Katy Mullan. So when I spoke to Raj Kapoor and Katy Mullan, it was last week, and so they were not quite in the crazy crunch period that I imagined that they are in the midst of today, days before the Oscars begin. They've both produced the Oscars before. Last year was Katy's first year. Raj has done it a few more times. So they've really seen all the things that could potentially go wrong, and then what happens when things go right, as they pretty much did last year. But they've got a new host this year in Conan O'Brien and his writing team coming along with them. And they gave me a few hints about what we might expect, both from Conan bringing in his sensibility and how they, along with so many other award shows this year, will acknowledge the impact of the LA wildfires and, make it a celebratory evening that's maybe a little bit more somber than what we're used to seeing. I really appreciated them taking time in a really insane schedule to talk to me about it. And I feel like we got at least a few clues, even though they are really obligated to keep things to themselves. So hear what we can learn about this year's Oscars in my conversation with the show's executive producers, Raj Kapoor and Katy Mullan. So Katy and Raj, as I was saying before we started recording, I know it's a really busy time. It's really crunch time. So thank you for taking a break to talk to me. People will be hearing this interview about a week after we're speaking. So if you can project yourself forward, it's the Tuesday before the Oscars, or people are hearing this. Where will you be? What will your every minute of your day be like? What's the level of chaos in those days before the Oscars actually happen?
I mean, we are going to be absolutely nonstop. Tuesday is really when everything starts to happen. So all our cameras are in. We look at every presenter look. We look at every performance. We look at Conan's monologue. We are deep in it. And it's all about lighting, nuances, how people are getting to stage, how everybody's framed, the stories we're going to tell. We're tweaking copy. We're working with the writers. It's a busy time for us. And then by Friday, that's when anybody who's actually performing on the show, so any musical performances and stuff, come to us, and we start camera blocking with them, running through all their numbers. And then Saturday is probably one of the most fun days. We get to see all the presenters, and they come in one after another, pretty much every 15, 20 minutes. There's a new star, a new celebrity on our stage, a new presenter. It's a nonstop day. And then Saturday night is our first dress rehearsal.
So, Katy, you're talking to us right now from inside the Dolby Theater, so you're kind of watching it all happen. So, like, what is the process of making that space? I mean, it's a beautiful theater. It's the iconic home of the Oscars. But what happens in these weeks leading up to it to get everything the way that it needs to be? What are you watching happen right now?
I mean, it is a gargantuan effort. There is an army of people who work on the Oscars for months. I mean, Raj and I started right after the last Oscars, it felt like, planning for this year. And the month before the show, it just steadily builds with more and more people becoming involved. So we have the incredible team who are putting the set design together, and like everybody here, the crew that's building it. There are a ton of people out there right now rigging and lighting and making sure that everything is in place for the set build. There's also the producers. We've got an edit facility that is, outside of the Dolby that's churning through all of our amazing nomination packages and the films that are going to be in the show. There are off-site rehearsals where some of the big musical numbers are coming together. So this final week is the pointy end of the spear where everything is really coming together. But what's really amazing about the Oscars is, a lot of the time with these big shows, you get very little rehearsal, very little time with talent. And the Oscars still has that draw and that pull that means that every star, like Raj said, comes through here. We have rehearsal time to really perfect and hone the show. Everybody's working around the clock to really make sure that it's absolutely perfect for the night of the show.
Yeah. So last year was the first time you guys had done the Oscars together. You'd all both had experience doing live shows. And, I think you were announced officially returning in the fall, but it sounds like even back like last spring, the gears were kind of turning. So what is the benefit of having learned together last year how to do this? And, you've got a new host, but you've got a lot of the consistent knowledge. What do you take from last year that you can really escalate or build on in this year's version?
I mean, I think we always want to think about how we improve. And so I think Katy and I both watched the show back last year, and any nuances that we feel like can be tweaked, writing that can be improved, the overall aesthetic, like there were certain things that we loved about how the show looked, but we also didn't want to necessarily repeat ourselves. So we do have a new set design, and it's kind of a combination of us using pieces that we really loved, but then also reimagining how the entire show flows. Because there were things that were super successful last year, like the orchestra reveal, and that they were on stage and they weren't in the orchestra pit, or they weren't at Capitol Records, which sometimes they have been in previous years. But it was such a great addition to the show to see 42 live musicians playing all these iconic soundtracks that you love, and people could actually see them in the room and see them on broadcast. So we love that piece. But Misty Buckley and Alana Billingsley, who are our production designers, they won the Emmy last year for their work. They are back, and they've kind of reimagined this set, and it's got a different scale. It's got a different grandeur. We're going to be really excited to share it with people when they watch the show on Sunday, March 2nd.
Yeah.
And Katy, this is your second Oscars then this year. It's kind of you get to now have been through it again. I assume that makes a pretty big difference. Having walked through the fire once, you can feel a little confident to do it again.
Yes, I think I'm sleeping a lot better this year. But it's just terrifying. This is the big one. When you work in live TV, this is kind of the pinnacle of what we do. So I think we all carry that pressure. We all do live a lot. So, we're used to that kind of pressure and adrenaline. But I mean, the Oscars was next level. I mean, it was something else last year. I think I was shaking from like the day before all the way through to the end of the show, just wanting it to come together perfectly. So I feel like this year we have the most amazing team. I've been through it once. So I've got a little bit of a thicker skin when it comes to like, the anxiety that I have. But I think like all of that stuff is good. Like that nervous energy actually really kind of helps propel you into just making sure that every little element and every little detail is really thought through. Because the problem with live television is that as long as it goes well, nobody notices. It's when something goes wrong that everybody gets, that's when the chatter starts. So we just have to really think about how we can mitigate anything going wrong as much as possible. And then when we have a great host like Conan, it definitely takes some of the pressure off as well, because you just know that he will be able to pivot. He will be able to respond to anything that happens in the moment live. And God forbid if anything does go wrong, we're in a safe pair of hands, because he's the kind of person that's been in the trenches long enough that like he'll have the ability to kind of move with it, flow with it, and like keep us moving forward in the night.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think Jimmy Kimmel had the most unimpeachable bona fides to handle something going wrong, having overseen the envelope mix-up. But
yeah,
it does sound like Conan's maybe the second best you could get, or someone who can handle wide-scale disaster.
Yeah.
Let's hope we don't have to find out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so there's a couple things that we do know. Obviously, you guys have a lot of secrets to maintain, but there are some details that have been shared. So I wanted to start with Conan. He was announced as the host not long after you guys were announced as returning. So it sounds like you've been working hand in hand the whole time. And you guys worked with Molly McInerney, who's, on Jimmy Kimmel's staff last year. So is a similar close relationship between you guys and people who've worked with Conan a long time? Like, how are you setting that relationship up, and what are you guys planning?
I mean, with Conan, it's really a trio. It's a trifecta, and it's Conan, it's Mike Sweeney, and it's Jeff Ross, and they are this powerful trio of humor and fun. And it's been so nice having a fresh perspective. And Conan and his team have so many ideas. We don't know all of them yet, but every day there's new things being pitched, and there's new ideas that we're pursuing, and there's fun bits that we have planned. And Katy and I laugh all day long. I think anytime we have a Conan meeting, he keeps us in stitches. He's got the best energy. He's really kind and warm-hearted, and yeah, it's really lovely working relationship that we all have together. And it's going to be fun and exciting, and it will be very different.
I mean, how much is it your job to say to Conan and his team, like, sorry, this is very large-scale live television. We can't do that. Like, obviously you want the sky to be the limit, but do you guys just have to come in with, like, here's what's actually possible in the Dolby Theater, and here's what you cannot possibly do?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the job. I mean, what's been really nice is, last year we were so fortunate to work with Molly and her writing team and Jimmy, because, they're super collaborative. We miss Molly. Hello, Molly. And this year it's been the same with the Conan team. And it is kind of, just throw everything at the wall, dream big. And then after we've all brainstormed, laughed a lot, there are people who give us that reality check of either budget or logistics. And I think the great thing about Team Conan is they've done the Emmys before. They've done award shows. They understand the kind of structure. They understand the limitations. So what's been great is even if something isn't workable because of budget or logistics, they come up with another 5 ideas that are possible. And I think what's really good about all of us is that we'll test each other on, is this really the best idea for the show? And Team Conan's really open to that. We're really open to that. It's like we have a lot of conversations about, what are the right moments to just keep the show moving, and also just, keep it in the room. I think there's like the excitement in the room. There's so many first-time nominees this year. There's so many amazing stars going to be in that room. And like Conan interacting with them is just going to be absolute pure gold. So it's really just about calibrating the right kind of balance of that within the show.
Yeah, I think there's the question a lot of us have, and Conan is so great, and his show was so silly, like gloriously silly in so many ways. But there's this element of the show that you guys have announced that it's coming in the wake of the wildfires. It's paying tribute to some really serious stuff, some like real genuine heroes. And so balancing that and like making room for both of them, how are you guys navigating that? How's the tone maybe going to change than what you imagined back in the fall?
It's been one of the things that have been very movable. I think like we have this temperature check that we continue to kind of monitor. Obviously, so many people in Los Angeles were impacted, and we definitely will pay homage to what has happened, touch on it with some real emotion and context. But then we also want to move into the Oscars. Like we're celebrating this amazing year in film and excellence and artistry. We will definitely have moments, and we hope we set the right tone and express our love for the city and all the people that are in it and that are helping maybe heal and rebuild. But then we also have our other job, and that is to celebrate this year in film. So it's really interesting because it's like Los Angeles is very much associated with Hollywood and with filmmaking. So this huge event has impacted our entire city. And for us, we think we've come up with something really beautiful that will touch a lot of people and give them all the feels.
And Raj, to stick with you for a second, you just worked on the Grammys, right? Just a few weeks ago.
Yes.
So first of all, I don't know how you do that. But then what did you learn from that? I thought that was so successful. It did such a good job leaning into the fire relief efforts. So was there anything from that process you learned that you would carry over into the Oscars?
I mean, again, it's about storytelling. It's about human connection. Like, I think we had some really lovely moments on the Grammys when we honored the small businesses, like when we had the firefighters on stage. Like, there were all these great moments of storytelling. But the one thing about the Oscars is, I think, we let the Grammys do a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, we're kind of very fortunate that the Grammys happened, 4 weeks before the Oscars. So that was the first real public facing award show that had to deal with the tragedy and the loss. So, our world also moves very quickly. So it's like us biding our time, making sure that people have had, enough time to kind of absorb everything that's going on. But for the world out there, outside of Los Angeles, so many people have already moved on. And so it's this very delicate balance. It's like everybody who's going to be in that theater, there's going to be a lot of people who have been impacted, who have lost their homes, who know people have lost their homes, or whose kids aren't able to go to school anymore because their school isn't there or their church isn't there. So there's so many people in that room that will be impacted. And I think we want to pay respect to everything that has happened. So yeah, it's definitely a delicate balance. We're lucky that the Grammys did some of that work, but we know we will put our own unique spin on it and have our own unique stories to tell how the Oscars also, tribute and honor what has happened.
Yeah. I mean, so much of the power of the Grammys is from the live performances it has. The Oscars are not having live original song performances this year. So I'm curious about that decision. And also, I'm hoping that the answer is yes. Will we have musical moments anyway, even if those performances are not part of it?
We are definitely having musical moments.
Yay!
They've been in the works for a while, and they will honor film and cinema, and also honor, I think, like global impact of some film and people who work in film. Like I think there's some other interesting stories that are going to be told, and of course, musical performances are always part of the Oscars. This year, they're just a little different. And for the original song category, we're actually putting a lot more focus on the songwriters. So we've done that for different categories this year. Like, we always want to rethink, reimagine, reinvent how we do it. And certain craft categories, certain design categories will have a different emphasis on them this year. And one of them is actually song. And the focus will be on the songwriters instead of the performances. And we think it's a lovely way to honor their skills and their artistry in a different way. And yeah, well, hopefully it all works.
Another thing you guys have said is happening is the return of the Fab Five, which is one of my, me and every other Oscar diehard loves. But it's been a little fuzzy about which category we can expect it from. And I don't expect you guys to tell me exactly who, but it sounds like we're used to it just always being actors. But it sounds like you guys are imagining that a little bit more broadly this year.
Yeah, I mean, last year was so, when we did the Fab Five last year, it was so brilliant having those incredible Oscar-winning legends on stage. It was so special. And like Raj said, we always want to continue to evolve and innovate. And so we didn't want to do the same thing again. So this year, one of the themes of the show is all about the collaboration and the interconnectedness of across the different departments that it takes and all the visionaries that it takes to bring these incredible movies to life. So what we wanted to do was shift the spotlight to some of the non-acting categories and really celebrate those disciplines with the Fab Five. So there'll be big stars on stage. We'll be celebrating some non-acting disciplines, and we'll be shining a spotlight on some of the categories that maybe don't normally get as much attention on the Oscars stage. So we're really excited about that execution. And, you know, I think Fab Five in the acting categories, I'm sure will come back again because we loved it. Just this year, we're taking a different approach and kind of really celebrating folks behind the camera.
Is that kind of a couple of years ago, there was a lot of controversy about giving some of the craft awards during the commercial breaks. And it feels like there's been a real response to that from the Academy. Is that you guys kind of bouncing back and saying, okay, instead of doing that, let's really make it a spectacle when we award these crafts? Is that an intention there?
I mean, I think for us and the Academy, every single award category is important. So we want to make sure that all of them have their own light that shines upon those filmmakers and those artists who work in those categories. And yeah, for us, it's a different approach. And, you know, I think you'll see that in the nomination packages this year. There's a whole different feeling of how we are celebrating collaboration and community and the art of filmmaking, and that you might see a little bit more behind the scenes than you have before. And it's really kind of a lovely story. We're so excited about the packages this year because we feel like they really do tell some amazing stories. Even if you've seen the films, there could be some little glimpses that you get from other people that have been involved in the filmmaking process that you won't have discovered before.
One more question for you guys before you have to go back to your very busy jobs. I mean, last year's Barbie was such a recurring theme in the ceremony, such an obvious way to link into movies that people really loved. I feel like Wicked is right there in that position, but are there any other films that you guys are having fun with or feel like, you know, if you're a fan of this movie, maybe you've got something to look forward to on Oscar night?
I mean, Conan is definitely going to touch on a lot of the best film categories. And I think he's going to have some fun with them, but also, I think he's got some really interesting stories to tell. And, it's also the year, like Katy mentioned, I think 13 of the 20 actor nominations are people that have never been nominated before. And that's absolutely huge. And for us, building that excitement around them and just how the race has kind of shaped up in the past couple months. We're in for a really tight race when it comes to who's actually going to be announced as winning their Oscar on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine you guys like seeing Conclave in October being like, oh my God, I have such a good idea for Conclave. I hope it gets nominated. Like you're rooting for something just because it could be a great moment on stage. I feel like we do that too. Well, thank you guys so much. There's so much to look forward to. And I will let you get back to your busy work. We'll see you guys hanging in the wings at the Oscars.
Okay. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you
Katy.
so much.
Nice
Let me talk to you.
That does it for today's episode. I'll be back next week with a special early edition on Monday, breaking down everything that happens at this year's Oscars. I cannot believe it's almost over. So look out for that episode next week early, and then we'll be back to our somewhat regular recording schedule. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, Joe Reid. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You don't want to miss next week's episode breaking down the whole season as it ends. We'll be back next week.